1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Who do we appreciate? Nothing but Commonwealth attorneys and great barristers and a wonderful wife. God bless you all.
Be preparing for the service here in just a few minutes. If you'd like to start locating your seats, the family's going to take a break just for a few minutes.
The Stallards, Betty Stallard, husband, wonderful. Miss Judy Claves. Hi there. How you doing? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
I'll take an extra one of those.
I laid one on your walker too.
Oh, did you? Oh, good.
When I go, I don't want that electric one.
Hi, Phil.
You play 4 rounds and 3 rounds. I mean, like dual plus mini.
So let us all sing together the Amazing Grace. It's inside your program. There's a song on each side, so find the Amazing Grace side. This was Phil's favorite. You ready? Here we go.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Was grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, we have already come. 'Twas Christ that brought us safe thus far, and grace will lead us home. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a soul like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see.
I'm hoping this is on. Is this on? Yeah. All right, awesome. Thank you all for being here. I am Gina Tolliver. I am the oldest of the kids, and I am here to welcome everyone in this celebration of Bill's life. So on behalf of all of the Tollivers, Laura, Morgan, and Philip, and also Jenny McGinnis, who we consider to be one of us, considering she's been with us for about 47 years. So, thank you, Jenny, for everything and every little thing you have done for us. So it is a celebration of life, and I could stand up here and tell you all sorts of crazy stories about having Phil as a father. You can just imagine. Just imagine. I could tell you stories about where we wanted to go boating, but the boat was blocked in by my mom's car, so he couldn't pull it out. What do you do if you're Phil? You gather all the boys in the neighborhood to go lift the boat up the back stairs and pull it to the neighbor's yard and have back your car up over the neighbor's driveway and go boating. Those are the experiences with Phil. And they are many and plenty for all of us. Dad's gift. Truly, his gift was being a people person. He never met a stranger. I don't know how many people here today have said to me, your dad was always available, 24/7, which also meant Jenny was available 24/7. So in that, though, is the connections, right, that we all make. Phil was a connector of people. I can tell you as his daughter that sometimes that connection was good, sometimes that connection was a little tricky. If I said what my name was, it's Gina Tolliver, and they said, do you know Phil? My first question was, how do you know Phil? Because how I know him is one way, and I didn't know if you were friend or foe. So, but I'm going to guess that most of you here were definitely friends. Maybe we're foes every now and again in a court of law, but for the most part, everybody here is here because they're connected by love. And we're also now connected by grief. And grief in so many ways is actually a gift for us because it means we've been loved. It means we've been touched by someone or something in some way that once it's gone, there's a bit of an absence. But in that is the joy of knowing the connection you had, the memories you have. I mean, I walk in and there's Chris Mailing and Alice and Bob Karen, Bob Sanders, these people who were such a part of my life. And here they are as part of it. I mean, Chris even introduced himself. I'm like, what are you doing? I worked for you in college. But I look at this and it's because of the interconnections. I've literally been on a double-decker bus in Europe and getting off the bus in Europe, and there stands a bunch of Kentucky Academy trial attorneys that are on some tour, and with my shaved head, I get off the bus and say hello to the attorneys. I've been in the Bahamas and literally introduced myself and someone, mentee, dear friend, and very dear friend, up until the end actually, and a supporter of all of us. And then we have Uncle David, as we know him, but David Mann, who was his brother-in-law, but incredibly so much more than that, his dearest friend. And so with that, I thank you once again for being here, and I welcome Jim to come up and begin.
Well, thank you, Gina. Gina, normally I don't use notes. I just talk. Somebody signals me to shut up and then I end. So act accordingly. But Judy Claves asked me to write something in behalf of Phil, which was published June 12th in the Kentucky Tribune, Northern Kentucky Tribune, and I felt like it captured Phil, so I'm going to read it to you today, if you don't mind. Phil, of course, was a lifelong friend. And I titled this, One of a Kind. To label someone one of a kind is a tired cliche often overused. But in the case of Philip Tolliver III, this was no cliche. I first encountered Phil in 1946 after enrolling in the 4th grade at Beechwood Elementary in Fort Mitchell. Phil was a 5th grader, and his aunt, Mrs. TALIAFERRO, it was TALIAFERRO in those days, was my teacher. There was always a racket next door in the 5th grade classroom, and everybody knew the culprit was Phil. The next year he returned to school in Erlanger, once his home he had once lived in had been rebuilt after having burned down. Thereafter, there was a semblance of peace and quiet at Beechwood Elementary, but not at Phil's school in Erlanger. The prodigal son had returned. Throughout high school, Phil and I competed against one another in multiple sports. Nothing had changed. He was still loud and boisterous. In 1955, after graduation, Phil enrolled at Center College in Danville, and I joined him a year later there. The first person I encountered at Center, of course, was Phil, who loudly declared to all the freshmen assembled he was going to get me in his fraternity. He did not. I was beginning to think Phil Tolliver, a name he changed to Tolliver to shed any association with the Italian mafia, had become my proverbial bad penny. I played football at Center as a freshman, which was Phil's cue to play football the next year following me. After graduating in 1959, Phil entered and completed law school at the University of Kentucky and then joined the Navy as a lawyer. This was the beginning of a law career that continued over 60 years, and where Phil realized that his flamboyancy and flair for the dramatic pleading played well with juries. After the Navy, Phil returned home to Northern Kentucky and then established himself as one of the leading criminal defense attorneys in the region. The key to Phil's success as an attorney, both in criminal and civil cases, was using his loud and outgoing method of presenting cases to gain a judge and a jury's attention. Both in the courtroom and most everywhere else, Phil immediately removed his shoes, and paraded around in his socks or barefoot. To prepare for a trial, Phil would seclude himself until he came up with a clever and often unique way of presenting the defense, and then tell his client exactly what to say when the trial unfolded. Phil's secret to success was to find a medical issue to use. The list of these is almost exhaustive, but it worked. Phil once half joked that everyone he defended in criminal cases was guilty. But one time, when he realized one of his clients was innocent, Phil hardly knew what to do. Phil was an ardent Democrat, and he used his affiliation to great advantage. Chair of the area's Young Democrats, he used this to gain favors from Kentucky Democrat governors, which included being appointed during the 1970s to a 6-year term as a Northern Kentucky University regent. Thoughtful but well-meaning chaos ensued. Some at the university liked and agreed with Phil, while others did not. He had prepped for regent by teaching part-time, first at the community college that preceded Northern, and then at the university's Chase College of Law. You guessed it, when I arrived as the first employee of Northern Kentucky State College in February of 1970, the first person to greet me was Phil. I told you he was my bad penny. For the next 55 years, Phil remained a constant. We worked and sometimes conspired together at Northern. He was my lawyer, and we went out to eat together. I had by now surrendered to fate. Phil was always going to be both a friend and part of my life. Anyone who came into contact with Phil, who by now had won many awards and much recognition as a lawyer, quickly discovered Phil was not the life of the party. He was the party. When and wherever he was, Phil worked the room, bouncing from one table to another. The man had no boundaries, and he was working the room. Amid all these hijinks, there was a softer side to Phil, I once saw him engage a 10-year-old girl in conversation by asking her what college she attended. Clearly taken aback, she replied she was just in grade school, to which Phil replied that she was not only the prettiest grade schooler he'd ever seen, but she also was the smartest. The smile on that little girl's face was priceless. It's unlikely there will ever be another like Phil Tolliver III. He was a presence, and he will not be forgotten. Phil declined dramatically in his final years, being diagnosed with CLL, which causes infections in the lungs, and that's what eventually killed him. He died at age 87 on May 26th of this year, surrounded by family. Phil always jokingly told everyone that God had him graduated from Phil's beloved Center College. And now Phil is likely busy checking that out. Phil was a master mason, an avid supporter of the Boy Scouts, a Center College Distinguished Alumni, and a member of the Kentucky Veterans Hall of Fame and the Northern Kentucky Sports Hall of Fame. I can still recall Phil's signature comment when he told everyone, including me, "I will sue you." Philip Tolliver III, my bad penny is gone. Each of us attending here today have special memories of Phil. Phil truly was one of a kind, a person that will long be remembered by everyone here assembled.
One of a kind indeed. A few weeks ago, I got a phone call on my fancy smancy new updated state-of-the-art phone. And I look at it, and it says the caller is Phil Tolliver. A number of things went through my mind at the time, flashing in nanoseconds. Holy cow, Phil is calling from inside the holy gates, sitting at the left hand of the Almighty to boast about his seamless entry and his position of influence in the legal counsel's advisory board, based on his offer to sue anybody on behalf of the Almighty. The second thought was, Phil is calling to get the last laugh. He isn't gone at all. He's on some tropical beach enjoying a pina colada and the view, and wants to share his big joke at our expense. So I answered the phone. And what I said was, "Tell me, please, that this is not Phil Tolliver." It was, of course, not Phil Tolliver, but sweet Gina, who was calling to give me some updated information for our story, and she said, "Phil had your number in his phone, and so that's how I knew how to call you." And I said, "Yeah, Phil had my number already." Just as he had all of your numbers. He had your number, and he wasn't going to let go of it. My first meeting with Phil was when I first came to Northern Kentucky in the early 1980s to be editor of the Kentucky Post. Why in the world Scripps saw fit to plunk me down in the middle of this male-centric universe, I have no idea. But my instructions were to work my magic and make the Post important to the community. So Paul Canoe, the outgoing editor, held an event at his home to introduce me to all the important people in Northern Kentucky. I'm sitting on the raised hearth in his home, and Phil magically appears, saying, "A woman in charge of our newspaper? What in the world is happening in the world? How can this be? My husband Gene was close by. From that moment on, we were fast friends. It was hard not to be the friend of a friend. That exclamation from Phil soon turned into, "A woman governor?" Because that's just the way it was. A woman governor. What was this world coming to? But Phil knew how to make the most of these new women in his life. And yes, he was a master at working the room. He nurtured the connections. He played to the power. You knew when Phil was in the room, he was making the rounds, connecting with everyone and connecting everyone to everything. He was brash and outrageous in the most charming way. But he had a big heart, a thirst for justice for the underdog, a passion for his interests that he insisted all his friends embrace as well. And if he was your friend, that was all that mattered. During that woman governor administration, Phil was well positioned for influence and service and leadership. That was, of course, by Phil's design. My favorite lead, which is the first paragraph of a real news story during my time at the Kentucky Post, involved Phil. And unfortunately, it's not one of the wonderful pages that are presented here. But Greg Pape, who was a very fine feature writer, had the job of covering, doing a series of stories of the people of influence with Northern Kentucky connections in the new Martha Lane Collins administration. I'm going to paraphrase the lead, but Greg wrote about Phil Tolliver. If humility were dirt, Phil Tolliver wouldn't have enough to plant a dandelion. Now that's the truth. He was our friend, beloved. We loved him in spite of himself sometimes, but he loved us right back in the same way. We'll miss him, but he is not forgotten. Thank you.
One of the dearest friends and colleagues of my entire life, Phil Tolliver, or PT as I usually call him, made an enormous difference in my life and consequently in the lives of our family and of course many other families. In order to understand what I'm talking about, I have to tell you how PT and I met and what happened from there. I had graduated from Eastern Kentucky University in the spring of 1969 and enrolled at the University of Cincinnati College of Law. I finished my first semester at UC Law School with a fairly decent GPA, like 3.4. But in the second semester, I became just hopelessly lost. I just couldn't get what law was or what lawyers did. So I became so overwhelmed that about midway through, that second semester of my first year, I took all my law books and threw them in a dumpster and quit going to class. It seemed pretty obvious what my future at the law school was going to be. Then, on May the 4th, 1970, the Ohio National Guard shot and killed 4 students at Kent State University and wounded several others. The anti-war protests spread from Kent State to other colleges and universities throughout Ohio and other states, including, of course, the University of Cincinnati. And to avoid potentially violent conflicts at UC, the administration closed the university, sent all the students home, and gave us all a blanket score of P, which stood for pass, for the semester. It was for that rather bizarre reason that I did not flunk out of law school in that second semester. But nonetheless, I presumed that my association with the law school was over because I didn't get it, and I started looking for some other career. Well, shortly after that, my wife Shirley and I were on vacation, and we were in a car that we had borrowed from one of my brothers, and we were involved in a car wreck. My brother's car was destroyed, and somehow I either had to pay for it or get it paid for, though the accident, I can tell you, was not our fault. When I got back home, my father, Jess Sanders, who at that time was the chief of detectives for the City of Covington Police Department, suggested that I get help from this young lawyer who was lighting up things in Northern Kentucky courtrooms, who had just gotten out of the Navy as a JAG officer and was doing fantastic work in our local courts. So we made an appointment to go see Phil Tolliver. And when PT learned that I had just finished my first year of law school, he reached behind his desk and got what for the time was a big file, dumped it out on his desk, and told me he wanted me to write him a legal memorandum telling him what the settlement value of that case was. That's like, I can tell the lawyers in here will know, that's like telling somebody, write me a memorandum on what is the meaning of life. There is no answer, but I was too young and ignorant at the time to realize that. So I undertook the writing chore in exchange for PT's generous offer to pay me $1 an hour in cash under the table to do it. And a few days later, I gave Phil the finished memorandum, and he used it to settle the case for exactly the number I said it was worth. And that started my career as Phil Tolliver's very first law clerk. By the end of that summer of 1970, and my experience with Phil and Phil's law office, law made perfectly good sense to me. I returned to the University of Cincinnati College of Law and did reasonably well, and pretty much stayed on the dean's list for the balance of my academic career there. When I complained to Phil that I couldn't continue to work 40 or 50 hours a week in his office and keep up with law school, he just looked at me and said, well, hire yourself some more law clerks, which I did. And I hired basically all my friends from UC, including Tom Smith, and Tom later became part of Phil's firm, and I believe became a partner for many years in Phil's firm. And then many dozens, maybe many hundreds of other law students and young lawyers also got their first law-related jobs with Phil Tolliver. And working with Phil was like going to legal graduate school while you're still attending law school. In large part because I clerked for PT and then worked for him as a friend and colleague, I enjoyed a very successful 52-year-long career as a trial attorney. I built my own firm, and all 3 of our children, mine and Shirley's, including son Rob, who's sitting out here today as your Commonwealth's attorney, became lawyers. My brother became a lawyer, and I have several nieces and nephews who became lawyers. I always explain to people that I must have made it look like fun. But I'm sure that none of that would have ever happened, and God knows what Rob would be doing today professionally or for a living, or what I would have done for these past 50 odd years, had it not been for my happening to meet and fall under the influence of PT Phil Tolliver. For our parts, PT and I remained close friends and colleagues till the day he died. We collaborated on cases, we consulted with one another, occasionally tried cases together, and a few times, very few times, tried cases against one another. Whoever side he was on and whatever the subject matter, PT was always a great trial lawyer, and he did a lot of good for a lot of people. Among other interests, the PT and I shared was a love for boats in the river. Phil always had a boat on the Ohio River, and for years, I spent at least part of most Sundays cruising the Ohio and Licking rivers with PT. Often we were joined with other friends like Frank and Judy Warnock. I think I saw Frank here earlier. The Summey brothers, Rob Manget, and many other people who enjoyed those boat trips with us. There was, of course, a lot more to PT than what I've talked about. He was a political genius. Dave Mann, Wendell Ford, Martha Lane Collins are all testimony to that. But I'll leave discussion of political Phil Tolliver to other people. I'll simply close by saying that PT, Philip Taliaferro, I always call him Taliaferro too, just irritating. Philip Tolliver III was one of my best and most beloved friends in the world. I love him, and I will always miss him. Thank you.
First of all, I want to say how grateful Betsy and I for the dignity and love that Philip's children have shown to their father as he dealt with the journey that we all must take. He was able to remain in his childhood home. He was surrounded by love and support, and so it's just so impressive what you did. Thank you so much. So I guess we all have stories. And I was thinking, how many of you have a story that you could share if we had time? Raise your hand. All right. And how many who didn't raise your hand have heard stories that you can share? Philip lived a big life. He enjoyed his life. He was a big, tall man. Yesterday, my good friend Jeff Birding said Philip was larger than life, and he was this in many ways. Most people remember meeting him, remember being in the room that he occupied, that he was the center of. Most of us are here aware of his many accomplishments. He made our community a better place. He made life better for dozens and dozens of his clients. But I want to talk about Uncle Philip. Uncle Philip was a fantastic brother, brother-in-law, father, grandfather, uncle, and was the center of all family gatherings, and that will be missed in so many ways as time goes by. But that's what I want to talk about. I met Philip when we were young teenagers. Our mothers introduced us. We were shopping in Pogues. Now, there are a lot of people in this room who have no idea what Pogues department store was. But that's where Northern Kentucky adolescents were doomed, men, boys were doomed to go with their moms to shop. And that's what we were doing. Philip and I, we were not comfortable, I'm sure, and we met each other. Now, Philip had no memory of that. I remembered for some reason. So some years later, I had my first date with Betsy. And she said, "Do you know my brother Philip?" I said, "Yeah, I met him." And somehow that got translated to Philip as my claiming that we were the best of friends. And for the rest of Philip's life, he could not fail to mention that I had ingratiated myself with his sister by claiming that we were the best of buddies. And later we did become the best of buddies. He was my best man, I was his best man, and we had many opportunities to share experiences with each other. And of course, there's no way that Betsy would have paid any attention to me at all if I didn't have the blessing of Philip. For her, Philip was always the big brother to whom she looked up, with whom she felt deep love, and from whom she received deep love. And if there's one thing that the family has learned, me first, my kids and my grandkids, that around Betsy, you better not say the least thing that is in any way questions anything about her big brother. And I learned early on that is going to be a long day for the husband if that happens. Philip's life was about God, country, and family, and I was never sure exactly in which order. We were both in the Navy, and it turned out my ship was going to be in Amsterdam on October the 5th, 1964, which was my first anniversary. Unfortunately, the Navy had no provisions for wives to travel with you or to be brought to your port that you might be in when you were celebrating an anniversary. Now, Philip had spent at that point 1.5 years in Subic Bay in the Philippines as a Navy JAG officer. He was being transferred to Alameda, California. And if you look at the globe, Subic Bay, the Philippines, California, Philip decided that the best way for him to go to California was to go west from the Philippines, and just happened to wind up in Amsterdam on October the 5th, 1964. And he did, and I was always grateful for that. We had a great experience. It was a wonderful anniversary. The only thing missing was Philip had a lot to do with my going to law school. We were later law partners, and Lynn Rokamp, who was our law partner at one point, said to me before we began, he said, "I can't think of two people more different than you and Philip." And I said, "Okay, well, we loved each other and we worked together." When Betsy and I first came home from law school, we were living in Mount Adams. I was practicing with a firm on 4th Street in downtown Cincinnati. And for a week, we moved to the homestead in Erlanger. Mrs. Tolliver, Shirley, was leaving town for some kind of journey. And Mr. Tolliver, I say Tolliver, you understand? Mr. Tolliver, Philip, we thought would benefit from our presence. So we were a one-car family at that point. I had to get to downtown Cincinnati for my job the next morning. I called Philip. I had no idea that he did not know that we were spending the time in the homestead, 2 blocks approximately from where he lived. And I said, "Philip, can I get a ride downtown tomorrow?" And he said, "Sure." So the next morning at 8 o'clock he calls and he says, "I've knocked on the door here at the house in Mount Adams where you live." This was from a phone booth, and no cell phones, from a phone booth in Cincinnati. And I said, "You're in Mount Adams? I'm in Erlanger." And he had never questioned my request. I guess it made sense. It made sense because someone he loved had said to him, "Can I get a ride?" And of course. And Then he did come back from Mount Adams to the homestead and took me downtown. Who would have thought would do that? You know, most people, I think, early on assumed Philip would pursue his own career in politics. He was going to run for office, and there was no limit to what he can do and be. And I have seen a lot of similarities between Philip's interest in people, the fact that he never could leave a room without saying hello, engaging with everybody there. They say that was one of Bill Clinton's stamps of success. I've seen Jerry Springer operate exactly the same way. Those three people shared the ability to own a room, whether it's around a family dinner table, whether it's a room of this size or a sports arena. They do that. They could do that, and they did do that. But somehow that's not the direction Philip went, and I don't know exactly why. But he loved pursuing politics through other people. He did have relationships with and work with so many governors. And Wendell Ford, who was a governor and then became a senator. And somehow I was blessed to have him interested in my political ventures. And we had a practice of meeting for breakfast at least once a week to talk about politics, to talk about, particularly when I was mayor, to talk about what the things are that I should be doing. And it meant so much to me, and it was so valuable to the quality of what I did. When I first became mayor, I was preparing an inaugural address, and Philip, bless him, made me memorize it. And it wasn't just enough for me to say I've memorized it. We spent hours in the vacant council chambers in Cincinnati City Hall as I went over my comments again and again and again. And it worked. I mean, I didn't look at any paper. I gave the comments, and it's the way to do things. As a plaque in his office said, when you snooze, you lose. That was one of the mantras of his life. I appointed the Bicentennial Commission in Cincinnati that prepared for the celebration of our community's bicentennial in 1988. And Philip was kind enough to accept appointment representing Northern Kentucky. And boy, did he take it seriously. He became a member of the executive committee of the Bicentennial Commission. He inspired some very creative approaches for the Northern Kentucky's participation. If you're familiar with the Riverwalk, which has a series of statutes of important figures important to Northern Kentucky, Audubon, Dan Baird, and so forth. That is something that Philip contributed. It represents or is a symbol of how creative he was and could be. And of course, his creativity, his mind just worked differently than other people. I mean, when we worked together on cases, when he worked on the Bicentennial Commission, his mind somehow thought different than other people. And we would talk about campaigns, and he would say, well, we should do this, you should do this, you should do this. And he would later say, these are good ideas. Some of them are. Now we have to figure out which ones work and which of them don't. But that is something that is precious in a political context. One campaign, I wasn't doing so very well, and Philip saw it, and so he concocted this story that a friend of his had called him and had seen me campaigning in a bowling alley in Cincinnati. That's one of the things that local candidates do. You wander through bowling alleys, shaking hands, and trying not to give away the bowling balls are being thrown down the alley. But anyway, this woman reported to Philip, she said, you know, it's amazing to see how David has changed. He projects charisma. And so Philip is feeding this to me, and I didn't know I didn't have charisma. So I suck it up. I win the election, and I improve some on my past performances, And Philip couldn't wait to tell me. He said, you know, when I told you about that woman describing your charisma? I said, yeah. He said, I lied to you. Philip also helped raise money for my campaigns. I'm afraid to ask this question, but how many people in this room were asked at one time or another to give to a campaign of mine? I'm afraid to ask who of you were asked and refused, so I won't do that. But I do want to talk about the humanity of Philip. He loved life. You know, I was telling Betsy, I just don't remember him ever saying anything negative about anybody. It wasn't his style to say, this is a bad guy, this person is somebody I wouldn't like to go against in a trial. That's not his way. He saw good in everyone. That didn't mean he didn't want to beat whoever he was trying a case against. He did not want to beat whoever Wendell Ford was running against, or Martha Lane Collins, or his brother-in-law. These things he wanted to do as well. But he wanted to win on behalf of his clients. And I've heard so many stories about people turning to him for help. One day we were eating lunch together, and somebody came by and said, can you take care of this ticket for me? And Phil grabs it and he says, yeah, I'll take care of it. And he says to me, when we get back to the office, give this to Patty and tell her to pay it. I said, wait a minute. You're going to fix the ticket by paying for it? I said, yeah. I said, what are you doing? He said, you know, that fellow's going to think I have so much influence because I fixed the ticket for him. Well, I'd say this about Philip. Two things I want to say. If I'm ever stuck in a foxhole, I always felt I want him in my foxhole, because there was no limit to what he would do for a family member, for a client, for any cause that he was devoted to. That is just the way he was. He became my brother, and for the rest of my life, I will miss him very much, and he will touch me every day of my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle David. And all of our other speakers, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for being here today. It means so much. We appreciate you being here, exchanging memories with us, and just celebrating the life of Phil Tolliver, my dad, a man who was, as I think we've heard, never afraid to pursue greatness. I heard a lot today about my dad, a lot of things that I knew and some things that I didn't. I did know that my dad loved to tell a good story. I knew that my dad loved to embellish on a good story. And I knew that sometimes my dad would tell a story so that things would look a little different than they were. And I do think that that's a little bit what happened, Jim, probably all the way back to grade school when he told you that story about the mafia. Because according to my Aunt Betsy, the name is Tolliver, and it's always been Tolliver. And it's the strangest thing we've ever heard. But he was very proud of our name, very proud of our family, very proud of Kentucky. Go Big Blue. And of course, Center. And I am here to close us out, but I wouldn't be my father's daughter if I didn't say just a few things. So I want to share just a couple of lessons that I learned from my dad that I think all of us can benefit from, because he was a brilliant man, he was a wise man, and he was Phil. The first lesson I think Gina actually already kind of spoke to when she talked about having all the neighborhood kids pick up the boat and carry it around the neighbor's yard. But number one is, where there is a will, there is a way. My dad was not one to give up. And that was a good lesson for all of us. Number 2, never, ever, under any circumstances, eat yellow snow. Wiser words were never said. And they were said frequently in the wintertime. Yeah. Number 3, leave them laughing. My dad understood, as everyone here knows, laughter is the key to joy, to connection, and to bridging any divide. And he was really, really good at making us laugh. As we remember him, his legacy, I am very comforted by the words of what's known as the Mariner's 23rd Psalm. I had never heard of it, but I found it tucked into his Bible with the name Beatty written on it. Beatty was his uncle, who was also in the Navy, as was my dad. So, let me just collect myself here before I get into that. All right. The Lord is my pilot. I shall not drift. He lighteth me across the dark waters. He steereth me in deep channels. He keepeth my log. He guideth me by the star of holiness for his name's sake. Yea, though I sail mid the thunders and the tempests of life, I shall dread no danger, for thou art with me. Thy love and thy care, they shelter me. Thou preparest a harbor before me in the homeland of eternity. Thou anointest the waves with oil. My ship rideth calmly. Surely sunlight and starlight shall favor me on the voyage I take, and I shall dwell in the port of God forever. Amen.
Amen. Beautiful.
If you would all please stand at this time. We want to say a special thanks ahead of time to Sheriff Korsberger, who is going to play taps for us, followed by very special John Stevenson singing My Old Kentucky Home. Dance band, right?
Ring-a-ling-a-ling-a-ding. Hello, John, this is Phil. David Mann's coming over here and Martha Lane Collins is coming up. We're going to be out by the pool. I want you to come over and sing My Old Kentucky Home. What are you doing? Nothing, I know. Therefore, I'm going to sing it for you tonight, and the first time I've ever seen a politician that says fewer words. But it's like this. And I loved him. Join in with me. I'll whistle a little bit first. the sun shines bright on my old Kentucky home. 'Tis summer, the children at play. The corn top's ripe and the meadows are in bloom, and the birds make music all the day. Weep no more, my ladies, oh, weep no more today. We will sing one song for my old Kentucky home, for my old Kentucky home, far away. Now, before I sing this last verse with you, just remember what Billy Graham taught me. It's the Holy Spirit's job to convict. It's God's job to judge. It's my job. My little sister Judy was with me. Judy's job, and my wonderful wife, June Geiman-Stephenson, who let me be here today. It's our job to love, and Phil loved, and so does his family. God bless you. Oh, the children roll on the little cabin floor, all merry, all happy and bright. By and by hard times comes a knocking at the door, then my old Kentucky home says good night. Now join in there. Weep no more, my ladies, oh, weep no more today. We will sing one song for my old Kentucky home, for my old Kentucky home, far away. God bless America, God bless Kentucky, and God bless the TALIAFERRO Tolliver family. Praise the Lord and pass the evidence to godly principles. Red, yellow, brown, black, or white, we're all precious in Jesus' sight. Amen. Did I behave, Jim?
Just barely.
Thank you all, and if the family will proceed on out, and you can join us as we.
Thank you, everyone. Uncle David was wrong. Dad did talk bad about someone. His name is Donald Trump, and before the mic gets taken away from me, do something for Dad. Stand up for your country and the U.S. Constitution. Thank you. Peace out.
Was that okay?
Yes, you did great.
Well, thank you for filming
great.
for me, too.
You are very welcome.
Was that okay?
Sounds like you had a radio up here or something.
I had a good time.
Yeah, no, it's fun.
I pulled Tom I feel sorry for myself. One of the things Chuck, I've never heard you play before. Great. I love fourth bird taps I've never heard.
Big John, you remember me?
Oh, yeah. How you doing? Are you hanging in there?
I'm hanging.
It's a challenge, isn't it?
Yes, they have.
Woo.
Full of challenge.
Well, now we happen to have here a man by the name of Cleet, and he happens to be the son of Bob Cleet, and your name is?
James Cleet.
James Cleet. Now I'm going to tell you something. I taught this young fella in school, and I mean to tell you he was a whiz-bang guy.
I didn't think you told lies, man.
Tell your dad I said hello.
I sure will.
And tell him I'll be singing 16 tons.
Best substitute teacher ever.
Well, thank you very
You know
much.
how to get attention.
That's right. Well, that's part of life.
Well, once you get the attention, you keep it.
That's right. That's right.
Just like Phil.
That's right. That's exactly right. Well, God bless you, and thank you so much for kind words. Have a great day.
You as well.
Thank you.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Who do we appreciate?
You.
You and you and you. God bless you. Bye-bye now. Well, you're doing beautiful. I'm proud of you. You all three. Gotcha. Now, your name is?
Brenda Strong.
And?
My husband was the founder and the coach for the Erlanger Lions Pee Wee football team.
Fantastic.
And then he coached the freshman team at Lloyd from 82 until 87.
Fantastic. And I taught at Erlanger Lloyd in 1970.
1970.
That's when I was a teacher there.
Uh-huh.
Back years ago.
I knew you were.
Advanced Government and American History.
Well, and my husband worked for Jim Viox,
Oh,
the
wonderful.
Viox and Viox Company for 37 years. He was a surveyor for he was in charge of all the outside work.
Well, God bless you, and you have a great day.
Thank you. And my husband will be gone 30 years in July,
Oh,
the
my.
15th of July.
Well, he's in heaven.
He had his one and only heart attack. And he was just inducted into the Northern Kentucky Sports Hall of Fame.
Oh, wonderful.
In December.
That's wonderful. God bless you.
He was a great man.
Yes, he was.
He was.
God bless you.
I didn't know if you knew him or not.
I'm sure I met him and knew him because of being in sports. I
Right.
was the head track coach there at Erlanger Lloyd back then.
In 1970.
It's 1970.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have a great day, and God bless you. We'll keep you in our prayers.
Thank you so much.
Hey, did they have the 21 gun salute for Phil?
21 gun salute. Pretty neat, wasn't it?
I didn't see it.
Oh, well, I got it all on film, and you'll be seeing it.
Really?
You can put it. You'll see it on YouTube under Travels with Dr. John Stephenson, and on my Facebook page, John Stephenson.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this is